Imagine climbing to the top of a 36-story building. Now imagine that building is packed with over 7 million pounds of pure explosive fuel, and you're about to light the fuse. For three men, this wasn't imagination, it was reality. They were about to ride a controlled explosion 240,000 miles to the moon. But even today, for millions, one question hangs in the air. Did it even happen? This is the insane and very true story of Apollo 11, and the hard evidence that proves it all. Back in the 60s, the world was locked in a tense Cold War. This wasn't just a rivalry on Earth, it spilled out into the final frontier. The Soviet Union was winning the space race. They'd launched the first satellite and put the first man in orbit. In response, American President John F. Kennedy threw down the gauntlet in 1961. He made a wild promise. America would land a man on the moon and bring him home safe before the decade was over. Honestly, it sounded impossible. To pull it off, NASA needed a special kind of crew. They found them in Neil Armstrong, the cool-headed commander, Buzz Aldrin, the brilliant lunar module pilot, and Michael Collins, the rock-steady command module pilot. Their mission, Apollo 11, was more than just science. It was about national pride and a symbol of human ambition in a deeply divided world. On the morning of July 16, 1969, at Kennedy Space Center, the world just stopped and watched. The Saturn V rocket stood over 360 feet tall, that's taller than the Statue of Liberty, and it was a machine of almost unbelievable power. At 9:32 a.m., its 5 massive first-stage engines roared to life, unleashing more power than 85 Hoover dams combined, and literally shaking the ground for miles. For the first 2.5 minutes, the astronauts were pinned to their seats by the sheer force, as the first stage did its job before dropping into the ocean. Then, the second stage fired, burning for 6 more minutes and pushing them right to the edge of space. After a couple of laps around the planet, the third stage gave them the final, critical kick, the translunar injection, flinging the Apollo 11 spacecraft out of Earth's gravity and straight towards the moon. But the trickiest part was still ahead. In a maneuver that was basically like threading a needle in the blackness of space, Michael Collins had to separate their command module, Columbia, from the rocket. He then spun the ship 180 degrees and had to perfectly dock with the lunar module, the Eagle, which was tucked away during the launch. With the two ships finally connected, the crew started their 3-day coast through the void, 250,000 miles away from anyone. On July 19th, after 3 days of travel, they fired Columbia's engine to slow down and let themselves be captured by the moon's gravity. What was once a silver dot in the sky was now a massive cratered landscape right below them. Armstrong and Aldrin squeezed through a narrow tunnel from Columbia into the Eagle, getting ready for the single most dangerous part of the mission. While Collins stayed behind in Columbia, becoming for a little while the most isolated person in the universe, Armstrong and Aldrin sealed the hatch and undocked the Eagle for its final descent. What happened next was one of the most nail-biting moments in human history. As the Eagle headed down, computer alarms started blaring, threatening to scrap the whole landing. With the world listening in, Mission Control in Houston held its nerve and gave the go-ahead. But then, another problem. Armstrong looked out the window and saw their automated landing zone was just a field of giant boulders. He immediately took manual control, flying the lander over the surface, hunting for a safe place to land. Back in Houston, you could hear the tension as the fuel numbers plummeted. 60 seconds left, 30 seconds. With barely 25 seconds of fuel to spare, Armstrong gently set the craft down on the lunar dust. A moment of static, and then Armstrong's calm voice came through loud and clear. "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed." The two of them spent the next 6 hours getting ready. Then, at 2:56 UTC on July 21st, Neil Armstrong climbed down the ladder and pressed his boot onto the moon. He spoke those words that are now written into history forever. "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." A few minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined him. For just over 2 hours, the two astronauts were like kids in a cosmic sandbox. They bounced around in the low gravity, planted the American flag, and gathered up 47 pounds of moon rocks and soil to bring home. They also set up scientific experiments, like a laser retroreflector array that observatories on Earth still use to this day to bounce lasers off the moon and measure its exact distance from us. They even got a phone call from the president, Richard Nixon. After 21.5 hours on the lunar surface, their job was done. It was time to head home. It's easy to look back on this as just another page in a history book, but the raw courage and genius it took is still just mind-blowing. If you're finding this story as incredible as we do, and you want more tales of what humanity can achieve, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It really helps us bring more of these insane true stories right to you. But how do we know it was real? For decades, some people have tried to cast a shadow on this incredible achievement, pushing conspiracy theories that it was all faked in a studio. So let's just shut that down and look at the science. First up, the waving flag. Skeptics say the flag waved and there's no wind on the moon. Well, the truth is a lot simpler. The flag was held out on a horizontal rod, but the rod got stuck and didn't fully extend. That's what caused the ripple. The waving you see is just the flag wobbling after the astronauts planted the pole in the ground. With no air to slow it down, it just kept moving for a bit. Then there's the classic. Why aren't there any stars in the pictures? This isn't a conspiracy, it's just basic photography. The lunar surface and the astronauts' white suits were lit up like a stadium by the sun. To take a picture of something that bright, the camera's shutter speed has to be super fast, and the aperture tiny. The faint light from distant stars never had a chance to show up on the film. It's the exact same reason you don't see stars during a bright sunny day here on Earth. And what about the weird shadows that aren't parallel? People claim this proves there were multiple studio lights. But they're forgetting one key thing. The moon's surface isn't a flat studio floor. It's covered with hills, craters, and dust, which all create uneven surfaces that make shadows look distorted. On top of that, the light wasn't just coming from the sun, it was bouncing off the bright lunar ground, the shiny metal of the eagle, and even the astronauts' suits. You couldn't fake that kind of complex lighting in 1969 if you tried. And beyond just debunking the myths, the hard evidence is just overwhelming. Those 47 pounds of moon rocks have a unique chemical signature, totally different from Earth rocks, and they've been studied by scientists all over the world. The laser reflectors they planted, still in use. And maybe the most critical point of all, the Soviet Union, America's biggest rival, tracked the entire mission with their own technology. They publicly congratulated the US on their success. If anyone had a reason to expose a hoax, it was them. And they didn't say a word. With the mission accomplished, Armstrong and Aldrin fired up the Eagle's ascent engine, using the bottom half of their lander as a launch pad to blast off the moon and meet back up with Michael Collins in the Columbia. They docked, transferred themselves and their precious moon rocks over, and then jettisoned the Eagle, leaving it behind in lunar orbit. One last engine burn kicked the Columbia out of the moon's orbit and put them on a straight shot for home. 3 days later, on July 24, 1969, their tiny capsule became a man-made meteor, streaking through Earth's atmosphere at almost 25,000 miles per hour. Its heat shield glowed, but held strong. The parachutes deployed and they splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. The crew was recovered, but as a final safety measure, these 3 heroes were put in quarantine for 21 days, just in case they'd brought back any moon germs. The 3 men of Apollo 11 didn't just come back as astronauts, they came back as heroes for all of us. They had made good on Kennedy's promise and showed the entire world what we can do when we work together towards a single, audacious dream. The mission was a masterpiece of science, engineering, and pure human guts. Apollo 11 wasn't just about getting to the moon, it was about reaching for the very best in ourselves. It proved that no challenge is too big, no dream too far away. And now, more than 50 years later, that one insane trip in a rocket built by millions of hands still asks us the same thing. What's our next giant leap going to be?